Hello and welcome to the Recipes for Success podcast. I'm your host and the CEO here at Zupa, Ollie Brand. Now, I've got an amazing guest for you today. It's Katy Moses. Now, Katy is the founder of KAM, a research and insights consultancy firm focused on the hospitality and food service industry. And she founded the company back in 2014. And Katy and I have this amazing discussion. Katy shares so many actionable insights. If you're a food service operator listening to this, you're going to get some gold from this discussion, because Katy shares the importance of the customer experience and gives some insights in terms of ways that you can really differentiate yourselves in really delivering on that customer experience. And she also shares some amazing insights around the challenges, obviously the challenges of today that we all know about around people shortages and costs, but around the challenges of tomorrow as well. And it's a really good forward-looking discussion that you can take and put into action immediately. So I'm not going to spill the beans too much on what we discussed, but I think I'm really excited for you to hear it. So for now, sit back, relax, and enjoy. No, Katy, thank you so much for coming down today. I'd like to kick off by just giving a bit of a background on yourself and how and why you do what you do.
Thank you for having me down in sunny Petersfield. How I do what I do, why I do what I do. Okay, so I'm MD and founder of KAM. KAM is an insight consultancy specializing in hospitality and food service. We are 9.5 years old now, I think. Although really we've been formed as a fully formed company for about the last 5. Before that, it was mainly just me doing a bit of consultancy work, and that has sort of organically grown into a business. And now we are growing that business with purpose rather than organically. I suppose my love of insight, it comes from my old sociology teacher. His name is Mr. Cox, and he was somewhat of a mentor to me before you kind of had formal mentors. And he taught sociology, and I adored it. I loved it. I loved that idea of finding out about humans and human connection and what makes people tick, what makes people behave in a certain way. And I always really enjoyed that. And then I went to university and I studied sociology and politics there. I unfortunately didn't finish my degree, and let that be a lesson to everyone out there, because you can still make a big success of yourself without a university degree. Certainly what we've done with KAM is beyond wherever I thought I would get to with or without a degree. And I think that when I came out of university, which unfortunately it was a forced option, I wanted to do something that was in that area. So I started work for another research agency called HIM, who are no longer called HIM. And I was there for 5 years. I left there as business development director. And I thought, right, what do I want to do now? Because previous to that, I was actually in recruitment. So I thought, do I go back into recruitment? Anyway, as luck would have it, and these things I want to do, I got a call from an ex-client who said, I don't suppose you could do this for me. And I thought, okay, let's give that a go. So that's how KAM was born. It's organically grown into an insights consultancy that not just specializes in hospitality, but lives and breathes it. And certainly that is our attitude towards what we do. That's
incredible. And I'd be interested to know, what made you fall in love with hospitality? Why was it hospitality that stood out to you?
Oh my goodness. I fell in love with hospitality when I was at my prior agency, because they were trying to branch into hospitality. It's not something that they'd really done before. And first of all, we were looking at pubs. So it was the sort of pub industry that I was getting involved in. And what's not to like about a pub? I think it's an amazing British institution. I think that it does so much good for the wider community. And of course, it's fun to be in. So that's kind of where it started. And then I sort of realized that actually the wider hospitality side of things was also fascinating. I think it is quite fast paced. There's a lot of variety. You know, with the projects that we do now, if we do a project for Rosa's Thai, it's going to be very different from the project we do for Junkyard Golf, which is going to be very different for the project we do for Punch Pubs. So I think that variety for someone like me who needs to have a million things going on was definitely attractive. Also, I'm a big foodie, and I really do like a glass of wine or 10. So again, I've managed to somehow sneakily maneuver my career into my hobby, which is going out and eating and drinking and having a good time with friends and family. So, I think hospitality has also, so I've just got back from Austin for the Peach Atlantic tour, which was fantastic. And we had this conversation one night around the dinner table about how there's just no horrible people in hospitality. The people you meet are really cool. They're really dedicated. They're always up to have a little bit of fun. And I also think it just brings out that entrepreneurial spirit in everybody. And that's the kind of sort of person that I'm attracted to doing business with.
Yeah, they're definitely a breed unto their own, the hospitality folks, and that attitude to just muck in and get the job done.
Totally.
When looking at it from like a research perspective, so you kind of look at the wider sector, in your own words, what does the hospitality industry actually mean to you, but also to the wider economy?
Well, the wider economy, I don't have the exact figures sat in my head, but I do know that we contribute more to, say, the British tax system than a lot of other major industries. And this is where you need your UKH Kate Nichols stats, because she knows them all off the top of her head. But we do contribute to the wider economy, not just through our taxes, but of course by employing people. We also have to think about what the impact that we have on community and charity. The UK pub sector donates around £42 million towards grassroots sports every single year. And if you didn't have, say, the pubs sponsoring the shirts and things for the local football teams, then you wouldn't have those. And I think that the thing for hospitality for me is it's so entrenched in our society. If you look at someone like the Alexandra, which is a pub in Wimbledon, who opened their doors free of charge every Christmas Day for anyone who was going to spend it alone. So we contribute to the mental health of the country as well. And I think that everything that hospitality does has a kick-on effect to other industries, and it also, it's very inclusive. It's all people. It doesn't matter if you're a kid and you're going to Bella Italia with your parents, or whether you're a great grandmother and you're being taken out to your local pub for Mother's Day. Everywhere in between, there's nobody that can't enjoy hospitality.
Yeah, that's such a wonderful message. I think the impact that it has on the community, but when I heard a statistic, I heard a statistic at one of the restaurant show quite recently. Yeah. I think it's from Tim Martin Wetherspoons. Yeah, saying that Wetherspoons contributed more in tax than the big four supermarkets combined. I mean, that was possibly an inflated number, but it's pretty staggering that level
overall
happens.
In tax, yes, because of course the hospitality industry is overtaxed massively. So if you look at tax levels in Europe, etc., we pay way beyond what we should pay. So possibly, I can't comment whether his particular stat is true, but what I do know is, hospitality is very unfairly taxed. And then when you look at things like business rates, all of that contributes to, the situation that we find ourselves in now. But certainly the government should and could be more of our friend than they are being at the moment, because we do contribute so much into those coffers.
Yeah, I mean, possibly even should be a central part of the post-Brexit Britain, when you think about the history of the country as well, and the attraction and the tourism that it would bring.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And, going to a British pub is still in the top 3 things that somebody wants to do when they come over here from Europe or America or anywhere else in the world, but just certainly Europe and America. And I think that we can sometimes undervalue that. And it really is a British institution. I have traveled around the world quite a lot in the last 6 weeks. And I don't know of anywhere else that has something that like the British pub. That's just, the idea of it being somewhere great to eat, to drink, that have that community focus, but that welcomes travelers. You even look at the design, the people that are serving you, that is a unique thing for the UK. That is not found anywhere else. In fact, on this trip to Austin, I was comparing this to somebody and I said, do you think that our pub is their dive bar? And we kind of went, well, it ticks a few of these boxes, but it still doesn't tick all of them, you know? So I think when you come to local restaurants, for example, you've got, this great tradition of family-run restaurants, of independent cafes. And I think that the hospitality sector in the UK is unique to anywhere else I've been.
Yeah, absolutely. And then since you opened up shop in 2014 with KAM, things back in 2014.
Good maths.
Yeah, thank you. How have you seen the industry evolve in that time?
Well, I mean, we've got this little thing called the pandemic, so I'll try to steer around that rather than straight through it, because obviously we know the changes that's made. What I've seen is first of all, the industry has consolidated quite a lot. So although I've been running KAM for 9.5 years, I was 5 years before that also sort of in this industry at somewhere else. But I think that the consolidation that has gone on was expected. There was a long tail. If you look at some of the casual dining brands, they just grew too fast and you ended up with a lot of underperforming. It's the same in the pub industry. There was a lot of legacy venues there that needed to either evolve or change use. Not that I ever want to lose a pub or a restaurant, but unfortunately, it is a little bit survival of the fittest. And if you're not good at what you do, then maybe there isn't room for you in the first place. So I think that consolidation I would have expected, and you could see that happening. I still think there'll be more, especially with the cost of living crisis at the moment. On a positive side, I think we're better. I think we've just worked harder to keep customers happy. And if you start to look at things like competitive socializing, that area of things, we do work with Junkyard Golf and various other comp soc, as we call them, companies. We've become a lot more about experience. We've become a lot more about not just throwing a pie and a pint at somebody, or not just giving them a lukewarm bowl of pasta, like actually making sure that the customer experience, the customer journey is fantastic at every point. Do we fail sometimes? Of course we do. But we know now that that's what we have to do. So I think that's been a big change, is that focus on experience. I also think from a personal point of view, running a insights consultancy, it's a positive. We're being a lot more data-led now, which is good to see, because it means we're actually listening to our customers, what they want, what they don't want, what they like, what they don't like. And when I first started working in the hospitality side of things, it was very rare that I spoke to even big brands that had really, really good insights and insights teams, etc. Whereas now people are understanding the value that can be bought by really taking insight and data seriously.
Yeah. I mean, do you think there's still a slight gap in the market for that? Because the product market fit piece, which is, as you say, and that's a big reason why we say consolidation, like a lot of places are going under. I saw a statistic quite recently. It was like 12 sites per day in the past year.
Yeah.
But citing cost and people shortages.
Yeah, we believe that certainly. So I'm a trustee for the BII, and I work really closely with UKH and the BBPA. And one of the discussions that is ongoing is that unless something is solved in the energy crisis, business rates, interest rates, in that arena, essentially in the wider economy, that more hospitality venues will close than closed during COVID. This next year will be more dramatic for our industry unless something is done.
Yeah, well, I guess it's the long tail of a culmination of so many things that have happened over recent years. It's pretty shocking. When it comes to the challenges that you're seeing within the market, what else are you seeing outside of people shortages and costs? And what do you if you could look into your crystal ball?
I'll give it a go.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we've been referring to it as a permacrisis because it's just constantly one thing after the other. And I mean, it always amazes me when I meet operators, whether that's of a massive multinational restaurant firm or whether that's a one-person cafe, you know, in a village somewhere. And I'm constantly in awe of these people who just seem to get knocked down and get back up and knocked down again. And it's amazing that they're managing to do that. And then you can put some of the other challenges on top of that. So, for example, some of the consumer trend challenges that we're seeing. We know that people are drinking less alcohol. Now, we do have a solution to that because, of course, we've got the world of low and no now, which is growing year on year so immensely. In fact, I read a stat today in the Financial Times that said that the Americans' consumption of low and no products is up times 8 on last year.
Wow.
8-fold.
Yeah.
You know, that's amazing. And we're seeing that in the UK as well. We're seeing, in fact, we've got a research report called Low and No, and we've got an event that we launch that at every year. And we have kind of stopped asking the question to consumers, do you know what low and no is? Because we've got up into the high 90s, you know.
Yeah.
And we're just seeing that grow year on year. So that is a challenge. But in the hospitality industry, if you are good at what you do, you see it as an opportunity. And you turn that into a special offering. You want to make the experience. I will keep coming back to experience because that's what it's all about. You make the experience for the non-drinker as good as the experience for the drinker. So I think that's a challenge. We also have a challenge of the fact that people are, and this may well be a current trend, going out less, but they are spending when they go. So that in itself, again, is a challenge, but it's an opportunity. You need to make sure that every single thing that you do when they walk through the door is fantastic and the best that it can be. I think consumer-wise, we also have a challenge of changing attitudes towards hospitality. We are lucky that we benefited from quite a bit of goodwill during the pandemic, and we did some research actually that showed that consumers were accepting of up to a 20% price increase up to 6 months after the COVID sort of dissipated so much. And I know it hasn't totally gone away, but you know what I mean. And so we benefited from that, but it's been very hard to then drag those prices back up for consumers because they just simply don't have the money. So consumers are much more price sensitive now.
Yeah, definitely. Well, just talking a bit more about the experience piece. For a business or someone that's listening to this podcast and they're, I don't know, a multi-site operator or they've got their own cafe, as an example, what's the best methods in your view to truly understand your customer and get those insights that you'd need to really advance your offering and bring in things like, as you say, the low and no options and all that?
I think, obviously, come to KAM, we'll do it for you. But if not, I think what you need to be doing is you need to be having a sort of three-pronged approach. So some of the work that we've done with customers recently is where we go and speak to their customers and sort of say, what do you think of this brand? What excites you? Where else do you go? Where else do you spend your leisure pound? Then we will speak to lapsed customers. So they'll have a database of people that haven't been in for a year, 2 years. And it's a bit like, why have you stopped going? Where are you going instead? Because people don't tend to stop going out. They just spread what they're doing into different areas. And then also obviously go to competitor customers and say, what do you love so much about Cafe X that you don't like about my cafe? So I think that's really important, and to get some sort of quant insight into your customers, lapsed customers, and possible future customers. I also think it's just really important to talk to them. We run a lot of roundtables for our clients, which I think is a really good way to get some good qual stuff. It's also always great to see customers interacting with each other, because then you can kind of see, what really does affect their behavior and what the commentary kind of needs to be around things. I think that we have so much data at our fingertips at the moment. You can use people like Wireless Social for your Wi-Fi. You can use Feed It Back. You can use various different tech firms, so to speak, and they will gather all that data. But it's no good if you don't do something with it. And it's really about putting some dedicated resource. Now, whether that's with an outside agency or whether it's bringing in an insights person, or if it's just your business, maybe it's just being really dedicated and putting 3 hours on a Friday aside to go through it. But the point is that a data set that's sat in the bottom of somebody's drawer is absolutely no good at all. It needs to be brought to life and it needs to be acted upon, in my view.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's really good insight for anyone listening. I think that's a good take on it. You mentioned a second ago about about respect, or say respect for the sector, or attitudes towards the sector, price increases, all that bit. Anyone I speak to, whether it's folks who have been in the industry for many, many years, going as far back as O-levels, and it's like, if you fail your O-levels...
I'm not that old.
No, but like, you fail your O-levels, like go work in catering, or... I don't know. It's sort of an institutional thing about across the wider UK of attitudes towards food as well as hospitality and service sectors. Do you think we're getting better at that? Do you think in the UK the attitude towards hospitality is starting to pick up a bit, or do you think there's still a kind of serving me and it's sort of an afterthought?
Right. Okay. I've got very strong feelings on this. When I was growing up, yes, absolutely. What you have just described is exactly that. It would have been like, if I'd have said to my parents I was going to go and do a hospitality catering course rather than going to university, they would have been like, you're doing what? I think that we were still in that rut 10 years ago as well, which is way after I was at school, by the way. I think that the industry has worked really hard to change perceptions. But I don't think it has necessarily really put its money where its mouth is. And I think we're starting to do that now. I'm part of an initiative called Hospitality Rising that's run by Mark McCulloch, who's one of my favourite people in the whole industry. And that was all about changing perceptions for the younger generation. So I don't know if you've seen all of the artwork and everything else. It is absolutely fantastic. Now, we did some research for them before they launched, looking at what percentage of people would be happy to work in hospitality, but more importantly, speaking to parents of teenagers, what percentage of them would be happy for their child to work in hospitality. And we've actually gone up about 20 percentage points in the last 2 years of the Hospitality Rising campaign. We know that some of it is a direct reflection to that work. We had to remind people that it's a cool place to work, but also that there's progression. And if you look at, we did a UK's largest hospitality salary survey, and we looked at that and we asked people, what's important to you for a role in hospitality? And two things that have shot up massively over the last sort of say 3 to 5 years. One is flexibility, because obviously everyone was sat at home and now they're like, actually, I don't want to do 10 night shifts in the bounce. And I think hospitality operators are understanding that, and they are creating a little bit more flexibility within their schedules for people. And the other is career progression. And as you just said, hospitality may used to be thought of as something you did whilst you were waiting to do something else, or something that you did when you were at uni. But actually now you look at the career paths that are available, and I hate the phrase bar to boardroom because I think it's just as good to be in the bar as in the boardroom. But the idea that you can better yourself and that you can have that very clear path to progression is something we didn't do before, and we are doing it now. And we need to make sure that the world knows that. Yeah,
100%. That is incredible. And the Hospitality Rising initiative is amazing. The Rise Fast, Work Young.
Yes, really good, isn't it?
It is really good. Do you know, has there been much engagement with from a political perspective with the government around really moving the dial with this? I mean, I'm talking about things like core subjects at school, getting to the Minister of Education and say, can we stick that as a core subject? Can we do things like that? Do you know if there's been any form of discussion around that?
I know that there has been discussion, but I'm not in a place to say how well those discussions have gone. But I love that idea because I hadn't really thought of it as a core subject. But actually, maybe if we did have, that's a really good idea, if we did have sort of service as a core subject. I mean, I did FDT at school. I'm sure you did the same kind of thing where you had to make a pasta bake and things like that.
I didn't even get to, I think we did a baked Alaska as a science class once.
A science class. Well, there you go. Yeah. That shows how far down the priority list it is for government. But yeah, no, I think that would, we do think that there is an argument for the fact that we need to start at the ground a little bit more. We need to get kids excited and enthused about hospitality. And actually, that shouldn't be so hard because what kid do you know that doesn't like going to the pub for a lemonade and a packet of crisps, or doesn't like going out to eat so they can pick their own stuff off the menu? We did a project called Family Dining last year, I think it was, where we spoke to parents of young kids, and they said to us, our kids love going out to eat, and they quite often will choose the restaurant. Obviously, they'll give them the 3 that they're willing to go to, and then the kids choose. But, kids are enthused about hospitality, and then as they grow up, we kind of take that enthusiasm out of them and belittle the wonderful industry and the experiences they've had. So yeah, if we can start there, then maybe we can help move things along like Hospitality Rising has done. Definitely.
I mean, yeah, my 1.5-year-old daughter Penny, I mean, one of the first words she was like, pub.
Really? That's so good. That's so good. I love that.
Yeah. But if we got it at an educational level as well, I think it'd be really interesting to see the impact it has on wider society in the UK as well, around like obesity, around things like that. Not just education around nutrition, food, the whole, all of it. It's so logical.
Oh, it really is. So logical. And I it's not often I get to the state of rage that I got to when the government described hospitality workers as unskilled. And it's like literally the hairs on my arms are standing up as we speak about this, because I wanted to turn around to any one of those government ministers and say, come with me.
Yes.
Let's take you into the Ivy.
Yeah.
And let's see if you can deal with those 25 orders that have just come in at once. Off you go.
Yeah.
How is that unskilled? How is a waiter or waitress or serving staff in general, what they do, what they juggle, and understanding allergies and being able to placate kids and remembering, again, maybe 25 different tables that they're serving at the same time and doing it all with a smile on their face. That is not unskilled. And we need to get past that. And unfortunately, the government putting out messages like that is of no use to anybody. And I think they are starting to understand our value and our worth a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. I've just got to keep banging that drum. It's crazy. But and just to take a sort of a step on, because we've spoken around the challenges, where do you see the opportunities at the moment in hospitality across the sector?
Oh, this is my favourite thing to talk about. So, first of all, the opportunities are, okay, let's start with sort of structurally. The opportunities are to sweat your assets. You cannot be a pub that opens 11 till 10, does, not on a Monday, does food that you've got to make sure that every single day part and week part is used. It's something that retail is really good at, and it's something we can learn from them. So there is the opportunity to just widen your horizons a little bit, because so many experimental things happened during the pandemic that consumers are happy to give it a go. Consumers there wasn't a cook at home industry before the pandemic. And that industry, obviously, it's gone up and gone back down again, but it's still there, and it's still a decent living for some people. I think there is more opportunity to have a hybrid home versus operator model. So that idea of, you can come here to eat, or you can do a cook at home, or you can get takeaway. Oh, why don't I cater for the party that you're having? I think there's more room for that. I think that there's a lot of growth can come from the consumers that we're not necessarily targeting that we should be. And yes, I know Gen Z. Yes, I know millennials. Yeah, blah, blah, blah. We know that they're important. We know that they're tomorrow's customer. But we just released a project called Golden Years, and we looked at the 65 plus. They've got more expendable income. They spend more when they go out. They are more positive about hospitality. You know, there's so much opportunity there that is absolutely untapped because we don't know what to do with older people. I've got a 92-year-old grandmother. There is nothing she likes more than me taking and paying for her to go out to lunch.
Yeah.
But she will never be a target for any of the advertising or marketing that's done. And I just don't get it. It's like people die at the age of 65 and we don't want them in our restaurants and pubs anymore. But that's not the case. So I think that the older generation we need to look at and more. Obviously, I already mentioned sort of low and no, things like that. There is a big rise in what people would call either experiential or competitive socializing. In fact, I'm speaking at a conference on exactly that tomorrow, which is just this idea that there's something else. There's something else that you give them rather than just food and drink. And I think that's a big opportunity for people. I mean, you've got pubs that have got rooms upstairs. You've got restaurants where actually you can have something that's interactive on the tables. It's about people meeting up to socialize, but having something to do at the same time. And I think, well, we know that footfall is way up. We know that bookings are way up for that particular area of the industry. And I think that's only going to continue.
Yeah, that's incredible insight for anyone listening to think, new markets to target. On the topic of trends, I mean, we say low and no and the generational piece. Are there any other trends that you think are worth shedding a light on or sharing?
I'm a big believer that the gin boom quite a few years ago, 10 years ago, whenever it was, is nothing to do with gin and it's nothing to do with pubs, bars or anything. It's to do with personalisation, because you can very easily personalise a drink of gin. You can have 20 different gins, 20 different tonics. You can have all the different garnishes. I was served 2 with bacon in Austin this week. And if you do that, then the consumer feels like they're getting something special, something tailored towards them. So for me, personalisation is a massive trend. I'm a big fan of Morigami Udon, for example. I love that they've got that personalisation station at the end. Actually, it works for them massively when it comes to operationally as well, because you don't have to have, and it's an extra 3 minutes of someone going, do you want this? Do you want this? Do you want this? So actually, you go and serve yourself that at the end. You can personalise it, and you feel like you're getting something for nothing. So that idea of personalisation and value for money combining is really, really powerful. So yeah, I would definitely be looking at how can you personalise the offer to customers? How can you make them feel like they're getting something that somebody else isn't? And we actually see that as a trend very much so in high-end restaurants. People don't want an email that says, would you like to come to us for, get a free gin and tonic with your meal? That the people that go to high-end restaurants don't need that. What they want is something that no one else has got. So, this idea of maybe having a black card, or this idea of having a certain ability because of your level of spend to personalize what you do and what you get, sorry. So I think that's really important. We're seeing a lot of premiumization at the moment. And that's because, as I said, people are going out less, but when they're going out, they're spending a little bit more because they want that experience. If I used to go out 3 times a week and I'm now going out twice, the likelihood is I might spend a little bit less than the 3 combined, but I'll spend a bit more on each one of those 2 visits that I am still doing. And when we say premiumization, I mean food, I mean drink, I mean quality of experience. All of that plays into a value for money perception. And then all of that plays into consumer satisfaction and happiness. So yeah, those 2 I'd definitely look out for.
One of the things that came out of the kind of, or was predicted as a part of the cost of living crisis, was that nothing's going to stand in the way of the Brit and their experience. I think that some of the statistics that came out of like Premier League attendance at the stadiums was like 99.9% as soon as they open back up, and whether it's low and no or just the pint of beer, always going to go for it. But that the middle sector, so people will still go for they want that experience, whatever happens, it's that treat, and they'll go for the high end experience or the low end, and the middle will fall away. Do you think that's actually what's happened, or do you think it's just?
Yeah, we're seeing quite a lot of that in casual dining as well. I think that it's difficult because we've seen that for quite a few years. I'm not sure that is just a cost of living or pandemic result, I think that is it's a dangerous place to be in the middle, because you're trying to be all things to all people. You also, of course, have consumers that are on very different missions. Because if you're in the middle, you might have somebody who would normally be in the more value proposition, who's trading up to be in the middle. Now, the experience and service and everything that they want is very different to maybe there's somebody who would normally be in premium dining, but is trading down into that middle, so you've got a lot more people to keep happy. You've got a wider customer and consumer base. It just makes it more difficult to satisfy the people that are walking through your doors. I also think that we confuse price with value for money sometimes, because I could name you, and I won't, because I always try not to negatively name brands when I'm doing podcasts or interviews, but I could name you brands that sit here in the say top middle end, who are nowhere as good as value for money as some that are in the top bottom end. And actually, it's a lot of it's smoke and mirrors. A lot of it is, big brands and big brand building, etc. When actually value for money is not price. I say that every single time I ever speak to anyone. Value for money is not price. It's, did I get value for the money I was prepared to pay for this experience? And some places do that better than others. And I think if you're middle of the road, it's harder to do that.
I saw I heard a really good quote. It's in a film that is like, you remember quality long after price.
Yeah. Oh yeah, totally. Totally. I also, I'm desperate for somebody to crack the subscription model for hospitality, because it's been done so well in retail and at home. I also think this was Anthony Pender, who runs Yummy Pubs and was BII chair as well for a while. He once said to me, the problem we've got, Katie, in our industry is that it's the only industry where the last thing you do in your interaction is pay. So if you go and buy a new dress, which, whatever color you want, whatever color suits you, Ollie, if you go and buy a new dress, you get the joy, you pay for it, and then you get the joy. So your lasting impression is the joy of that dress that you've bought. Whereas for us, the last thing we're doing is handing over our credit card. Now, there was one pub that managed to, I think, negate this, which is, so what they did, well, I tell you who does it great is Flatiron, because you get a free ice cream as you leave. And awesome. Most people, unless you've eaten there before, you won't know that. They don't advertise it anywhere. It's just as you leave that you get handed your ice cream. And it's brilliant. In fact, Charlie Carroll, who's one of the founders, he was in Sri Lanka with me just recently, and he said everybody just absolutely loves it. But there was another pub that did this thing. So it was local, very local, independent, where they, as long as you'd booked online or you signed in, they knew where you live or whatever, the next morning would drop a freshly baked loaf of bread on your doorstep with some of their homemade butter. It's a very high-end pub, so they can afford to do it. But how nice is that to wake up the night after you've been out to a pub, had a few drinks and dinner, and then you've got a little gift on your doorstep.
It's such a nice touch. I mean, the lasting impression is incredible.
Yeah. And that is not expensive, because we know that bread is not expensive. No. Yes, it might be a bit time consuming, but you might even only want to do it for your really high end payers. And the fact is, of all the covers that you've got in there on the day, you're only going to be able to do that with the people that have booked online. So, I just think that we need to find something in hospitality where the final interaction is not us taking money from the consumer.
Yeah, that is a fantastic viewpoint. It's an amazing take. You say that. I mean, one of the most memorable experiences I've ever had was at the Gramercy Tavern in New York. It's my favorite restaurant ever. Just everything about it, the quality, everyone who works, and everything and anything about the supply chain, about every dish, and the last thing they give you on the way out the door is a breakfast muffin.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and it's just such a nice touch.
I've been there, but I've only been there for drinks. I've not eaten there. I went there on a Propel, I think it was, study tour just before the pandemic. But it's a beautiful place as well. It's really beautiful. But that's great. And I just think that sometimes we just need to make sure that final interaction isn't about us taking money. I think that's the important take for me.
Do you think the subscription model works? Because I know places like Pret has got a coffee subscription. You get 5 coffees a day.
Yeah, look, Pret have had to change that around a few times because I think they first launched it, didn't they? And then they were like, oh my God, we're going to have to limit it. Because I think it was unlimited to start with, wasn't it? And what they're doing now. And I'll be intrigued to see what because they've now just introduced a meal deal as well, haven't they? I can't, and I've thought about this a lot. I can't see how we make it work. But if we can get it to, it will be a game changer for the entire industry. In the same way that loyalty cards were. And I still don't think we do that very well either. I don't think we do loyalty very well. Tell you who does do loyalty very well is Anglian Country Inns, run by James Nye and his brother and family. They have got a card that can be used in any of the pubs, and you get points on it for your stay, and then it can be used again in any of the pubs, and you get special offers and this kind of thing. And I actually stayed in one of his pubs last year, and sort of really got talked through the loyalty scheme, and I thought it works really well and it's really simple. Red Mist Leisure did one as well. So I think there is work to be done on some kind of subscription and loyalty. They're the two that I need to do a bit more research. Maybe that's what we'll do. Maybe that should be our next project.
Yeah, it's a worth.
Can you remind me about that?
Yeah, I'll remind you. Yeah,
because I think that's a really good idea.
Yeah, for sure. No, so we've kind of focused a lot on the consumer trends as well as the kind of product market fit aspects. I mean, when it comes to trends that you're seeing from an operational perspective and how businesses are operating within the industry, what have you seen? Has there been anything relating to, with supply chains as an example? Have you seen how they've evolved? Think about globalization versus localization.
Supply chains is boom. Well, look, we all know that there are problems there. And they're not solvable by the individual operator, unfortunately. What the operators are having to do is be more agile, be a little bit more nimble. There's obviously been some menu optimization as well. And I think that the smart operators are getting better at things like food waste. They're getting better at utilizing sort of, what do they call it? Nose to tail. Is that what they call it? Yeah. Tail, yeah. Yeah, that's it. So they're getting better at that kind of thing. But essentially, the supply chain issues can only really be solved by the government and the supply chain. What we have seen operators doing is utilizing tech a lot better. I mean, order and pay. I know that it was a requirement during the pandemic, but it was sort of sneaking into the hospitality industry before that. And then obviously then it exploded. I think we're also using sort of tech companies that do sort of staff optimization, rotoring, all of that kind of thing, much better. And you see the guys from like S4 Labour and Harry and all of those people putting some, in fact, we just did a project with Growth Partners looking at exactly that, employment engagement. How can you use tech to make sure that the employees are happy? That aside, I think the really innovative, so I think it's Rockfish, isn't it, down in Brixham, and they've got quite a few of them. They bought their own trawler last year because they just realised that actually, and what they do is they go out and they trawl, wherever they do. Don't ask me, fishing is not my specialist subject, but they go out and they do that. And then from there, they take what they need for the restaurant and they sell the rest on the dockside to anyone that wants to buy it. And it's almost like supply chain needs to go back to basics a little bit in some ways because it's got so complex and everybody seems to be taking a bite out of the money on the way. And eventually that's just not going to work for us. Equally, Brexit, of course, has harmed us immeasurably. With various different taxes and delays and just general supply issues. But don't get me onto Brexit because then we'll be here all day.
Yeah, but it's so true. I think when businesses kind of integrate they actually kind of do vertical integration with their own supply chains and they start doing their own thing. I mean, that's a pretty fascinating example about having your own trawler.
Yeah. And also the consumer is way more aware now of things like food miles and sustainability. And we're seeing, actually, that's another sort of trend. You're talking about what else we're seeing. They care about it now. Before, it was a lot of lip service, but especially the younger generations, they're starting to realize how important that is. And no, I don't want my fish flown in from Venezuela. I want it from the local waters if I can get it from there. And I think that is something that the higher end, quite often independent restaurants and pubs are doing really well, which is looking around them. And I went to a great pub in the Isle of Wight, and I won't remember what it's called because it was a long time ago. It's the first time I'd seen it. Now you see it quite often where they had a map of the Isle of Wight, and they had, well, our garlic comes from the Isle of Wight garlic farm, or our beef comes from here. Now that was the first one I saw, and that's got to be 9 years ago, I suppose. You see that quite a lot now, but it's important, and it's growing in importance. So with the supply chain issues, operators are having to just tighten everything up, get things from local places, less waste, more usage, portion sizes. Having just got back from America, or 2 trips to America, one of the things that it just made my teeth itch was just this idea that they were absolutely fine to scrape half it in the bin. We don't need as much food as quite often we're given. And actually, if you look at the older generation, they say, and I've never seen this before apart from this report we've just done recently, that one of the things that puts them off going to a place if the portion sizes are too big, because they just can't finish it. And then they feel it's a waste, and older people don't like waste. So if you've got an older clientele, you're better off doing good quality, slightly smaller portions, and then shouting about the fact that you don't have food waste. And, that then leads into a bit of personalization, because you can sort of say, this normally comes with X, Y, and Z, but if you don't like any of those 3, we can take that off for you. That kind of thing is that innovative thinking around supply chain that we need to see continue, I think.
Definitely. And with that as well, I guess with that localization or the provenance being much closer, sometimes it's more expensive, but then people are willing to pay for the experience and then knowing where it's come from exactly.
If you look at Welsh lamb, for example, we've done some work with the Welsh government on this. And I love Welsh lamb. Why would I not? But we did some research that went out and sort of said to people, if you knew that this particular product was from nearby, and people are willing to pay up to 20% more for it, for the idea that actually it's homegrown or home reared or whatever you want to say. It's got lower food miles. It's probably come from a smaller producer, and I like to support smaller businesses. If it's a smaller business, then there'll be more sustainability sat around that. And actually, when you start to tick those things off, all of those areas are current trends. So yes, of course, it's better for the environment. It's also better for your pocket, because customers are going to come more often and pay more for it.
Yeah, definitely. And you mentioned a second ago about technology kind of facilitating this in some ways. I actually, I asked ChatGPT to generate a question on our, I told her I was having
Okay, I've not actually had anything. I've read about it, but I've not had any interaction with anything that's ChatGPT at the moment. So go for it.
So I explained that we have a podcast today, Research and Insights company, and also giving some context around how the sector has been more of a laggard when it comes to technology adoption in some ways. So this is the question I got back. So given the historical lag in technology adoption within the hospitality industry, the emergence of mixed reality, virtual reality, and AI, or artificial intelligence, presents new opportunities. From your perspective, how do you envisage the future of hospitality with these advancements? What transformative changes can we expect in the industry? So it's a double barrel question. But
I'll tell you what, that's the trickiest interview question I've ever been asked. I don't think I want this machine to interview me. Okay. I don't know a huge amount about this. I'm not, I'm a technological Luddite, really. But what I do know is that I've seen I've seen VR being used really successfully in training, for example, because obviously having that opportunity to simulate experiences for staff is a great thing. So virtual reality, I've seen it used in that way. Of course, this goes straight back to the experience thing again, the experiential. When I was in Vegas a few weeks ago, I went to a place called Area 15, which is all about AI, VR, all of that kind of stuff. And I actually did a it was like the best hour of my life because I'm a big fan of zombie movies. And myself and a load of other hospitality professionals went in and did like a zombie shoot 'em up type
Incredible.
thing. If I went back to Vegas, I would get off the plane and go straight back to that place. It was so realistic and it was so brilliant. And I'm also on the last season of Walking Dead. So for me, it was so topical. But, I think that we can create experiences for people using that technology. But we must remember that tech for tech's sake is utterly pointless. It's no good for the operator. It's no good for the consumer. And we also must remember that, in my mind, technology needs to do one of two things. It either makes the consumer experience better, or it allows the operator to have some operational advantage that still allows them to then make the consumer experience better. And it's just got to come back to that, I think, at all times. One point also I'd like to make, and I'm writing a blog about this as we speak, the idea that I think where we fall down a little bit when it comes to the experiential and the competitive socializing, again, I won't name any brands, is that we see that as the main thing, and then we throw some food and drink on top of it. And in my mind, we should see whatever the game is, whether it's golf, whether it's zombie shooting, whatever it might be, that should be the main course. That's how we look at it. Not the main thing, the main course. What are we doing to bookend that? What's the starter? Well, that's the drinks and the welcome. What's the dessert? Well, that's the after drinks and some food. We need to be bookending technology with real life experiences.
Definitely. Yeah. I couldn't agree more. The whole support and facilitate as opposed to tech for tech's sake is just completely pointless.
Yeah. So thanks for that chat.
Yeah, Chat GPT.
GPT.
Yeah. We and also around the trends, we've mentioned a bit around the generational, 5 generations or over 65, as you say, when it comes to consumers. When it comes to the workforce, I mean, how now that there's 5 generations in the workplace, what kind of trends are you seeing from that side of things?
Interestingly, I had this conversation with the guys at Hospitality Rising because we think that there is room to possibly have a campaign that also attracts older people into hospitality. When you think about it, they generally have very good communication skills. They are happy to do shorter shifts or much more flexible working because they're maybe retired from whatever their job was in the past. I think that we are not inclusive of the older age group as an industry when it comes to staffing at the moment. There's a great story of a lady whose name I'm going to get wrong, but I think it was Rita. And she was one of the first employees for the Hard Rock Cafe. And she's still with them. And she's in her late 60s, early 70s, something like that. I've met her. She is an absolute powerhouse. And, she does the job she does better than any of the younger people because it's just, you cut her open and she's got Hard Rock Cafe written through her. She just knows what she's doing. So I think that there is room for us to do that.
It's amazing. Kieran Bailey came on the podcast and he literally gave that example of the values and the culture of Hard Rock Cafe. And he's like, I still recite the values day in, day out. It
was through him I met her. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a good example to use though. And we do have, I think, a terrible attitude towards people working at an older age in this industry. And I think that it needs to be changed.
Definitely. And on that topic, I mean, when we talk about value and culture, and you're from a recruitment background, and you've shared some great content recently around workforce engagement and how to attract and then retain great people.
Yeah.
And the great stuff you do with Hospitality Rising as well. But, where are we with that, do you think? Do you think it's lacking significantly? I mean, you just mentioned, but in terms of making sure that the engagement is there?
I think we're getting there. I think we're on a positive turn. I don't think that we're getting any worse. I mean, anyone that you speak to in the industry would say they'd like it to go faster. Of course we would. But I think that what we really need to concentrate on is, getting our ducks in a row in so much as not being about lip service, but actually having good employee engagement, having great benefits, having flexibility, having good management, career progression, training. And it is like, spinning plates. There's a lot to think about. But there are also a lot of people out there doing really good stuff to help. I don't know if you know Abby from 68 People. The stuff that they're doing is really interesting, and they're very much insight and data led. There's so many great companies in our industry that can help. And I think traditionally, maybe we haven't utilized that as much. Also, we're a very collaborative industry. I remember when the pandemic hit, and there was one company, actually Yummy Pubs, I think I mentioned them earlier, and they had just written a training manual for during COVID times. And they just put it up on the internet for everyone to take. And they said, anyone in the industry can use this, just, and they had 700 downloads. That's 700 separate companies.
Powerful.
Yeah. And, they're still leading the way in their training and what they do. But, it's the collaboration. I get fed up when people say to me, oh, they're a competitor of yours when they're talking about another agency. So, no, we don't have any competitors. We have other people who are going for the same budget pot as us, maybe. Yeah, absolutely. But we all do different things. We all bring different things to the table. And actually, the collaboration piece for me is the most important bit.
That's seriously powerful. I've got two questions that come off the back.
Go on, this one.
Well, I mean, the one thing is around the culture and businesses getting more purposeful and shared values and all that stuff, and that becoming more in the fore. I'll just leave that one out there. I mean, is that are you seeing more of that? Yeah. People getting more purposeful?
We're seeing more of that, partly because, and actually this is a good example of where it's coming from both sides. Partly because the consumer wants it, because one of the results of the pandemic was people being more local, people helping out neighbours. There was a lot of goodwill, that kind of thing. So we're seeing the consumer demanding that, hang on, I don't want you to be some horrible big conglomerate that has things made in China and by kids. And, so actually that is definitely important. But then also the employees who are going into the businesses, especially when I say from the younger generations. By the way, when I say younger generation, I mean, the sort of 16 to 40. I don't just mean the very, very young. Because actually, if you're like me, I'm a millennial, just scraping in there by my fingernails, then that's what we've all been about anyway, but just not as stringently as, say, Gen Z. So I think that idea of having purpose and doing good is incredibly important. And you'll see that that's rewarded as well, because coming out of the pandemic, the places, so for example, I live in South London, that ended up doing really well was the pub opposite me that ran the food bank, was the small family restaurant down the road that cooked for the homeless people, because people see things like that and they remember it, and it is important.
Yeah, it's fundamentally good. Yeah. It's really, that's wonderful. The other question was around that community piece. I mean, that's an amazing example that you just gave. Who was it? You said that shared the manual of
Yummy Pubs, who also cooked for the homeless. They got, again, collaborated with loads and loads of different companies. So, there's somebody that had 1,000 pizza bases stuck in a freezer, and obviously they weren't able to open. So they were donating. I went along and cooked pizzas for one day. It got me out of the house legally. It got me out of the house. But and they cooked. I don't know the stats. They would be able to tell you better than me, obviously. But it was something like 6 months and 80 homeless people a day they cooked for. 3 meals a day, because I went and did the pizzas, and then I packed up all the breakfast bags and all that kind of stuff. And we just got, I say we, I had nothing to do with it apart from my one day of work, but they just got donations from everybody. Because you remember when restaurants and pubs closed down, they didn't get a chance to sell their food or anything. No. And a lot of people had, 20 legs of lamb sat in the freezer and, things like that. So they were all put to very, very good use. And I think that community piece, can you say a good thing came out with global pandemic? I think I have done before, so I'm going to again, which is that collaboration and that community. I just think that has, and I think that stayed. I do think that stayed.
But local community, but also the community of businesses within the sector. Yeah. And I guess in a way, because you are creating a community yourself through KAM with the insights you share and everything. And do you see that businesses, as you said, competing against each other, but more going for the same pot as opposed to, and it's better to have a healthy competition where you're retaining people in the same industry moving between companies as opposed to going elsewhere.
Yeah. I mean, the fact is, you know, back in the olden days, and I'm sure that this does happen now, but if you were the dog and duck and you had the White Lion down the road and you'd run out of Guinness, you'd give the White Lion a call and they'd give you a keg of their Guinness so that you could, continue to trade, and then, you know, that would come back to you at some point. And I think what we saw during the pandemic was a lot of that happening, a lot of, well, I've got this and I've got this. And we saw shared spaces. We saw, in fact, there's even two of the big food service companies, I think it was Breaks and Bid Food, they combined their lorries, they combined their haulage because they realized that, well, I've got some up here that I can't use. Well, great, we can use that. You know, so that collaboration is incredibly interesting to see. And again, it has stayed. And I've forgotten what your initial question was.
No, just saying, are you seeing more, or like, do you see the businesses within the sector becoming more friendly, I guess, in terms of less unhealthy?
Totally. We've just been on all 3 trips that I've been on in the last 6 weeks, have been with competing brands, all of them. You know, the Austin trip, there were maybe 20, 25, and they're all competing because they're all sort of casual dining or high-end casual dining. They're all competing for the same customer. But actually, they've all got different USPs. There's always something different. You know, you look at someone like Hawksmoor, who I hold up in massive high regard as a brand. I mean, they're just so good. And I've had Hawksmoor abroad, I've had Hawksmoor at home, and I've had it in London restaurants. And I think that you can learn something from everybody. You really can. And I spoke to Will, who's the founder of Hawksmoor, of this trip, and I said, why are you here? And he said, because I just want to find out what's everyone doing and how are they doing it and what advice have they got for this and what can I tell them about that? And that collaboration is very unique. You do not get that in other industries.
Yeah, whenever I speak to our customers as well, there is definitely shared best practice and sharing notes and all that. It's incredible. And that's a powerful message.
Yeah.
In terms of the overall direction of the industry, then, how do you is your outlook bright? Are you thinking it's good? Or
look, my outlook is bright because I love hospitality and because it's like music. The world without it would be a very, very sad place. But the outlook has a bumpy road ahead, I think. And I daily hear of somebody or a brand that I like or love that's either in trouble or that's gone under. And that in itself, it's quite an emotionally exhausting industry to be in at the moment. It really is, because it's tough. But I do think that we will come through it. I think we've learnt, I think I said this at the beginning, a little bit of ebb and flow. We need to be quite agile, quite nimble. We need to be able to roll with the punches a little bit, unfortunately. And we need to, keep a very tight P&L. We need to be great to our staff. We need to provide perfect experiences for customers. And I think if we do all of that, I think then we're on a path to success. But yeah, there's a lot of potholes there.
Yeah, definitely. And if you could shed a light on anywhere where you feel there's wrongdoing in the sector, whether that's ethical or operational, anything, what would you shed a light on?
Oh, that's a horrible question, Ollie. I won't name any brands, but I think I don't know if you know who Tip Jar are, but Tip Jar, a company started up by James Brown, who's at Brewdog, to help make sure that tips go directly to serving staff. People should just use apps like that because it reassures the consumer that actually you're rewarding your staff for what they do. I found out yesterday on this trip that there's one very, very big brand who uses their staff tips for the staff training. And that to me is abhorrent because the tips are because somebody's gone above and beyond. We are not a tipping culture like America where it's ingrained and you've got to do your 20%. We are a tipping culture for people that have done a really good job on their service for us. So I think we need to look very carefully at remuneration and benefits with our staff. I think that's very important. I think we also need to be very honest about we talked earlier about provenance, etc. And I've seen examples of, this British this, and actually it's not. And, because we used to live in from a marketing point of view, you would call it a black box. So you're too young to remember, but the sort of Gillette, the best a man can get. Nobody knew anything about Gillette. They just saw that advert, that tagline, and that was it. Now you have glass box marketing, because I can find out anything I want about you by going online, by finding out what do you stand for, who does your chief exec vote for, all of those different things we can find out online. So we have to be very careful. I guess what I'm saying is we've got to be genuine. We have to we have to treat consumers with the respect they deserve, not treat them like they're idiots, because they're not. And they will, it needs, whatever we do needs to be honest and true and genuine. And like you said earlier, for purpose, for good. And I think that there's some areas to focus on. Yeah,
definitely. And do you see, in terms of innovations that you see coming through into the industry, have you got any views on that?
There's some really interesting tech stuff out there, but we've already spoken about that. I think that we are doing really well with what we would call differentiating diets. Again, we did a project on that recently. We never used to be very good at it, and I think we're getting there now. You've got amazing vegan options. We're getting much better, partly by law, partly by experience, partly by some very sad events. We're getting better at allergies. I think that we are, that's a really nice growth area as well, because that idea that it doesn't just have to be the same old thing over and over again. There's a little bit of innovation there. I think that's a positive area of the industry for us.
Yeah, definitely. And closing that loop of the customer relationship management system, or the personalized experience, and then you come in with things like allergies, which is becoming more and more prominent. Absolutely. As well, like being able to do that straight up.
Yeah.
Something I like to do is have you ever heard of start, stop, continue?
Yes, I think I know the premise of it.
Yeah, basically. So for the wider industry, okay. What you'd like it to start, stop, and continue. Okay. Just give your perspective on that.
What would I like to start, stop, continue? Okay, I would like to stop. Oh goodness, I might need a second to think about this one.
Straight in with the stop.
Yeah. Well, yeah, there's a few things I'd stop. I would like to stop. Okay, I'll tell you what I'd like. I'd like to stop quantity over quality. Now, I mean that with staff. I mean that with food. I mean that with drinks. I mean that idea that, like I just said about being in America, that half my meal is going in the bin. I would much rather pay the same amount for half the amount of stuff and make sure that it's good quality. And of course, that feeds into staff training. It feeds into the quality of food and provenance, premiumization, it feeds into all those trends. So that's what I would like to stop is quantity over quality. I would like us to start putting the needs of the customer as our primary thought in our mind. And I'm saying start because a lot of people do it, but not everybody does. And I'd like to see that as a holistic blanket attitude across the industry. This idea that what should we get? Should we get this set of knife and fork or this set of knife and fork? What would the customer prefer? So everything down to those little details, I think, should be customer orientated. And then the other one was continue, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I think just continue to innovate, because I think we're an incredibly innovative industry. A lot has changed since the pandemic, but also before that. And that entrepreneurial spirit that you find in hospitality in the UK is second to none. So let's continue with that.
Yeah. On that topic, actually, I'd love to get your take, as you are an entrepreneur yourself. What has the journey been like for you?
Bumpy. You know what? I love it. It's been the best thing I have ever done in my career was start my own business. I adore, I'd say 90% of it, which is bigger than it's been in any employment I've been in before. It is a journey. And I remember I went to the Tate Modern Cafe, and I met with Mark Stretton from Fleet Street Communications. Do you know Mark? And because he'd just started up Fleet Street. And I said, what's it like? And he said, Katie, you're going to love it. He said, but you will wake up still at least once a week for the next 10 years. and sit bolt upright and think, what the have I done? And he's absolutely right. So you do that. You have some shaky moments, but having the autonomy to do what you want to do and how you want to do it is priceless. I've got an amazing team. I mean, they are far more capable of any of this than me. I just come out and do podcasts. They're the ones doing all the hard work. They're so talented. They're all what I call high achieving individuals. They're just people. They just get on with it. There's no hierarchy in our business. It's just we are a team that work together. I think that surrounding yourself with a good team is absolutely essential because you can't do it all yourself, and you should be able to play to your strengths, not your weaknesses. If you look at someone like Blake, who is my business partner and insights and strategy director, I look at what he does on a day-to-day basis, and there's just no way I wouldn't know where to start. So getting the right people in your business is absolutely essential. Treating them well. We have some great benefits, things like finishing at 3 on a Friday and 30 days holiday and get your birthday off, and there's theatre training and all this kind of stuff that we're doing this year. So, those things also make it fun. Nobody goes into business to be bored. So I think that the fact that I chose an industry I love that essentially allows me to incorporate my hobby of eating and drinking my way around the world into my day-to-day life has softened some of the blows. And, being in a pandemic and running an insights consultancy based in hospitality and married to a musician was not a good few first months. It was shaky to say the least. But, you keep on going. And it's what I love as well is being able to pick who I work with. So we have recently turned down a client because they were so rude to one of our team, and you don't need to take that. So that entrepreneurial spirit, you've got to be a bit bullish with it as well, I think.
Yeah, the product market fit goes both ways. It's totally.
Absolutely.
I think people see the business as it is right now and the situation that it is in right now, but they don't see the millions of decisions.
The peddling underneath.
The sport. And I think it's sort of what you built is incredible, really.
Thank you.
I'd love to just step to the other side of the bar for a moment and get your take. So this is a question which basically, if you could feed back to, as a customer and your experience going into a hospitality location, what do they not always get right? And what would you give as advice immediate there and then on the spot of this is an annoyance in your experience?
Well, we know from our research that the pain points are the initial arrival and then the paying. So we've obviously already had the conversation about paying at the end. I think that we need to be very careful that we don't cut off our nose to spite our face when it comes to things like order and pay apps, because there are some people that don't want to use them. A lot of the experience comes down to the training that we give our members of staff. We need to make sure that we are employing the person, not the job. So if the person is good, we can train them. And certainly the experiences I've had in hospitality that have been negative have mainly been to do with service rather than product. And I think you're going to remember that a lot longer than you're going to remember maybe a rubbish burger that you had or whatever it might be. We need to get better at understanding and being able to relate to our customers quite instantly, because I think sometimes, I've gone in with like my friends' younger children or something like that. I mean, I went into actually, I'll give you a good example of one that was terrible, big managed pub company. And I took them to Godstone Farm for the day. I was doing my Auntie Katy bit, and we ordered our food in the pub afterwards, because obviously I was going to take them to a pub, start them young. And the serving staff bought my meal before theirs. Now, you have a 1.5-year-old. You feed your children before you feed yourself. And so I had to sit there, and I couldn't send it back because I went back in and I said, look, it needed to be eaten there. And then, so I shared it with the kids, but they didn't like some of it. Anyway, it was an absolute diabolical nightmare. And they were given a sheet of paper. I did a blog about this actually. I think it's on our website. And I was quite vitriolic about it because I was furious, because it was just common sense. It wasn't, This wasn't about training. This was just common sense. And, they gave a piece of paper for the kids to do crayons on and slap some crayons down, and they were all blunt, and somebody had already scribbled on the other side of the paper. It was just a nightmare. And I think we need to get better at looking after our customers, being able to understand that different customers need different things, and being able to, be that sort of chameleon, as an operator and as a server, or anybody that works in the industry, because having two hungry, annoyed kids, you're nodding.
Yeah, I can empathise.
Having two hungry, annoyed kids on your hands, and driving, so you can't even have a glass of wine to try and get yourself through it, is not ideal. So I think that's what we need to get better at. Yeah,
definitely, it's that experience for everyone. And if you could pass on a bit of advice to your younger self, starting out again, what would it be?
Oh my good God, how much time have you got? Well, first of all, I'd say it's all going to be okay. You're going to be fine. You are going to get better teeth. Your hair is not going to be quite so bad. No, I would say concentrating on being in the moment, I think is something that we don't do as much as youngsters. I think we're always like, what's the next thing? What are we going to do here? And oh my God, I did that. What does so-and-so think of me? I think that I would say be in the moment a little bit more, enjoy what you do, and stop looking constantly for the next big thing. Still be entrepreneurial and innovative. I would also probably say that I shouldn't have gone to university because I couldn't afford to be there. My parents didn't have the money to support me. But it was so ingrained into me that that's what I should do, because I went to a school where that was kind of it. I would have been better going straight into work and giving myself a couple of years head start, and working hard to achieve what I've achieved a little bit earlier, maybe. So I do think that I would say that to myself. That's not right for everybody. I'm well aware of that. But be in the moment, work hard, and don't take things to heart too much.
Yeah, that's really good advice.
Yeah, I still take things too personally sometimes, and that would be a good bit of advice for me to give me right now.
Yeah, I know.
Just the older me to the younger me.
Yeah, that's really good. And what's next for you?
What's next for me? So KAM is growing. We're hoping to add to our team this year, which is very exciting. We've got a couple of new products that we're looking at. So obviously data-led. We've got some fantastic projects going on. We're working with some great bespoke projects at the moment. Our client list is amazing. Whenever I look at it, I kind of pinch myself. We're starting to work quite intensively in the experiential and casual dining area, which is really exciting for us. We'll grow the team and see what comes next. Try and be a little bit organic as well as a little bit innovative, and a little bit more in the moment. I think that's what we're going to try and do.
Amazing. Well, Katy, thank you so much for coming onto the podcast.
Thank you for having me. This has been great fun.
Yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure. And I really, honestly, everything you do is incredible and really grateful. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Well, there you have it. I hope you enjoyed my discussion with Katy and you found it as useful and learned as much as I did. I mean, really, the insights that Katy shared, there are some real golden nuggets in there. And I hope you can use them to maximum effect within your own businesses and put them to work. But as I speak to more and more people, and people like Katy, of course, that feeling there is a real movement in place to make hospitality a central pillar of the UK economy. And I know collectively we are going to do it. So with that, if you have any questions or views or comments you'd like to share on the podcast, please don't hesitate to get in touch. My contact details are on the screen. If you've got anyone that you think would find this interesting, don't hesitate to share it with them. And of course, please don't hesitate to hit subscribe. But for now, this is the Recipes for Success podcast. Thank you for listening.